Hey, and welcome back to another video. In this video, we're going to look at creating your own height maps for Twinmotion. First of all, what is a height map? Well, it's those black and white images that you've probably, hopefully seen that can be used to make topography, landscape, terrain, whatever you want to call it. And we have the ability within Twinmotion to import that directly and get a great looking terrain very quickly. So that's what we're going to do in this video. Before we get into it, if you happen to learn something, demolish that like button. That's telling me that you did. Also consider subscribing. All right, getting into it now. There's nothing to do but import it. So I'm going to go to import, landscape, because that's the key here, landscape, and then open my file. Now, at this point, it's like, okay, I've got a couple here already, but I'll show you where you can get your own, make your own and everything, because we want to deal with that, of course. So let's go ahead and do that. But as you can see here, all the different file types that we can use when it comes to importing landscape, specifically landscape, into Twinmotion. We've got, of course, a PNG for height maps. We've got specific points like a text file. I mean, meshes, a SketchUp file, anything. All this can work as a landscape. It's really cool because importing a file as a landscape file is going to allow you to do different things than if it were just a plain old FBX, a plain old model. And we'll get into that probably in another video, but nonetheless, we're looking at height maps because in my mind, they're typically the easiest. I mean, if you're not looking for anything super specific, but typically they are the easiest because it's a flat image, you know, it's a PNG, you've got that, you can make it, something like that. And if you just need a basic terrain with some nice hills, whatever, you can do that really quickly. So we've got all the files here, and we're going to come back to these files. But I did want to show you these options, of course. Landscape, largest dimension. So this is pulling directly from nothing at this point. But whenever I add a file, it will pull from the longest dimension of my file, which will be in pixels. And this is one of my big knocks on Twinmotion are the units, actually. So that you have the option of choosing between meters and inches. And because I'm, in the United States, I want inches. Yeah, actually, I want feet, but I can only choose inches, and that's okay. But a lot of the conversions, things that you need to work with, when it comes to landscape, this dimension here, and the transform values, they're all in meters, which is like, what's the point? Like, I don't know. Anyways. So this dimension, this number will be the longest dimension or longest number of pixels of length of your picture, your image. In this case, it would be our height map. You might think, well, I want it to be scaled, and I know, I do too. That was the first thing I wanted to do. And honestly, if you want to crash Twinmotion, you can try and make this a real scaled to your image. So that's going to be very difficult. I do want to point out, and I probably should have pointed out sooner, this height maps and using height maps in general is not something that's going to be precise, at least with this method. There are, I'm sure, ways that you can pay to get a really nice detailed height map of a particular area and know the scale and then bring that scale into Twinmotion, and then hopefully it doesn't crash. That's the only thing. It still might crash because of the size. Anyways, so that's largest dimension. Amplitude is going to be the height or the offset or the z-axis. And again, it's in meters. I don't like that, but it's just kind of the way it is. So we'll do our little conversion ourselves. Amplitude being how high is the highest point. So when you look at a height map, any black you see is going to be like anything completely black is, I guess you could call it 0. And then anything completely white is 1. So like everything is operating within that gradient. And within that gradient, there are different values. So the amplitude, let's say we have it at 500, that means pure white or all the way to the top or the value of 1, whatever, however you want to look at it, is going to be 500 meters tall. Okay, I mean, so there's our gradient. It goes from 0 to 500. So you're welcome to set that if you happen to know the highest point or you just want to set the highest point yourself. That's a good way of doing it, and that will essentially do it. And then smoothing, it is what it is. It's literally smoothing. I will bring in the same height map a couple times and we'll see the difference between smoothing and not smoothing. And I will say, oftentimes you're going to want to check smoothing. Okay, we've looked at everything. Now let's go ahead and find a way to make our own, whether it's downloaded online or just build it in Photoshop. We're actually going to do both. So this is a great online tool if you want to attempt to use real world data to create a height map. And I'll leave this link in the description, of course, but it's someone who ended up making this and posted it on their GitHub. Great. So anyways, it's here, basically a web app. So there's a lot of things that we're looking at, and there's a lot of things that we probably don't really care about. So there's a max elevation, minimum elevation. And again, that all that is telling us is the black is 0, okay, which I guess would be the ocean. And then the max elevation, which I assume is in feet. I don't know. This is where things start to bring up question marks in my mind. Like, these types of things tell me you can't get it scaled. You just can't. So the idea is that I want to get a nice looking terrain that at least begins to represent a real world looking terrain. And so the max elevation is, 3,629 feet, something, I don't know. Doesn't matter really. The scale factor is an attempt to try and scale your image based on the depth, like the height, how far out we are from the Earth's surface, and then get an overall length of your image. And now I actually went through the process of converting this. And so it's basically the cross product of the length of like 1 being just 1 over the length of your image, which will be 1920 because I'm using a resolution of 1920 by 1080. So 1 over 1920 and a value of this scale over X. And that's what we're solving for. So you would basically multiply that 1920 or the length of your whole image by this scale factor to give you the total real world value in feet, I think, meters. I don't know. This is exactly why I don't know. So you can do that. And I tried to do that. But of course, I was apparently too zoomed out too far. And it was too wide. The image was too big. And I wanted to make the topography so big that Twinmotion just crashed. So maybe we zoom in farther. Maybe something like that. Well, anyways, with all that out of the way, just know this is not going to be precise. So don't try and make it precise. So auto exposure, it's just going to basically turn off these values that you can't edit them. So I can't edit them. It's based on really what I'm looking at and what's in my image. So like there will be a whitest white somewhere in my image. If I zoom in over here in the black, there will be something still that shows up as pure white in my image. And that's fine. But if you want to turn auto exposure off, you could actually set these minimum and maximum elevations. If you don't want something pure white, whatever, don't care about that so much. Ocean data, I don't care about ocean data because I don't care about ocean data. It's as simple as that. Map lines, these are only going to help you determine what the heck you're looking at. In this case, I want to look at something specific, which is helpful. I don't just like look in some random place. Now, let's go to the Rocky Mountains. That will at least give us an idea of the potential that we could get from a height map. And then map labels. None of this will end up exporting as sort of like none of the labels will. So that's fine. That's cool. Maybe we go somewhere, Breckenridge area. Okay. So if we look at it here, if you were to do the cross product of this scale factor, it's giant. Like even though like this is a number of miles by number of miles, basically. So I don't necessarily want to do that. But like I said, we're not going to do that to scale. So I'm going to zoom in here, and I want at least one of the peaks, and then the city of Breckenridge, and then maybe some peaks on the other side. So I'm more or less happy with this. It looks fine, and there's nothing else to do at this point. You literally you get everything that you see, and you just click export. And once you do that, we're going to end up putting it in this file. I'm going to overwrite this Breckenridge file here. I will replace that, and that's it. We've got a PNG. Okay. Well, let's go back to Twinmotion and start to play with this, see what it looks like. Back in Twinmotion here, again, simply import, landscape, open. And now I need to go to find my file. There's my file. And make sure we have set all the options here. So these are things that you might have to play with because, again, there's my 1920, which is the width in pixels. It's actually 1920 by 1080. So it's 1920 pixels wide, and it does that by default. And if you start to mess with this, it can I've had some bad luck. You go too high and it starts to break and Twinmotion crashes. Now for the amplitude, we can start to at least begin to believe that we're getting to some sort of number that is closer to the overall amplitude or height of some of these mountains that we're seeing in the image. How would we do that? Well, I can come back here and I could say, okay, well, my max elevation is 4183, and which is this ridge here, probably, and this one over here, something like that. And then my minimum elevation, which is basically in the center of Breckenridge, the city itself, is 2839. Okay, I mean, it's hard to believe these are feet because I know the base heights. Like, some of these heights are 14,000 feet. So it might be that these are in meters. So maybe we can assume that they're in meters. And for the sake of Twinmotion, let's go ahead and do that. So what we're looking at here is, let's subtract these basically. So whenever I subtract 4183 from 2839, I get 1,344 meters. Okay. That, in my mind, it seems to work that there's probably a difference of about that much between the Breckenridge city and then the top of these peaks. Okay, so let's use that as our amplitude. And this is purely experimental because you'll see this is probably going to look absolutely stupid, absolutely absurd. And I'm not going to put on smoothing, so it's going to look that much worse. And I'm not trying to show you this to say like, oh, it doesn't work. I'm trying to show you this to tell you that it's not going to be perfect. And here's what you might want to do if you want to get it closer to something usable. Okay, so we're good with this. And again, I hope it doesn't crash. We'll hit OK. And there we go. I'm going to end up hiding my starting ground. And we can see there is this absolute ridiculousness. I mean, it looks cool because of the mountains. It does look cool. But come on, like it's a bit unusable, because it really is high. We could bring this up and you can clearly see what we're working with and what's coming out of the file. I mean, it's doing somewhat of its job. It's kind of working because it's bringing it in. We can see that there's a clear difference between one side and the other, but it is terrible. It is terrible. So at this point, I'm going to, we can look at this all day and it looks awful and it's not usable. And by usable, I mean it's not smooth. So let's go ahead and make it smooth. So I'm going to import another version after I hide this monstrosity. Hide this. And we'll go to import. Again, make sure you go to landscape, open file. Let's go ahead and copy this. Paste that there. We'll use our copy. And again, let's make sure we have our amplitude set to 1344, which we saw was ridiculous already. And then let's make it smooth. So we'll work our way there. But you'll notice it actually changed my amplitude. And I can't say that I know why. I think it has something to do with the size of the landscape, just how unrealistically tall this would be compared to the size of it. Like you're basically creating a giant pillar of landscape. So apparently it's maxed out at 1024. So I've looked online. I cannot find any guide or information as far as how we can input either real world values, get close to the scale, or even something that's, a go by, something usable, or if there's a scale or something. I don't know. But nonetheless, we're okay with that. We're going to show smoothing and see what it looks like smooth. Okay, immediately, like so much better. And I can't say it's like actually usable still because it's a bit absurd, but having been to Breckenridge, the mountains are not quite this tall, quite this dramatic, but at least it's getting there. It's something. And so maybe we need half of the amplitude. I don't know, but I mean, it's really cool looking. It's nice and smooth. It's actually workable. We can do something with it now. We could place things on it. So it's not bad. It really is not bad. It's something that we can use. And kind of at this point, it just is what it is. I'd probably play with the amplitude a bit more. So let's go ahead and make the amplitude just a bit different. We will go ahead and make a third copy of it just to say we did and import that in. We'll go ahead and put the amplitude at half of that value, which is 512. Make sure it's smooth, hit OK, and see what we get here. All right. This is more of what I would have expected. So if we go to the ground, who knows what this will look like on the ground, but on the ground here, this is a little more what I would expect. Still maybe a little tall, but maybe not. not too bad. But overall, I'm pretty happy with this. And you can see the quality is really great. And this is out of the box. I've done absolutely nothing. And Twinmotion does a great job of just putting basic grass and rock on bluffs. It's cool. But at this point, there's a lot more we could do. And I'm not going to get into this. You could use any of the landscape tools, anything at this point, but it is what it is. So the moral of the story here is there's not a great way that's at least free and online that you can create a height map using real world data that is to scale in Twinmotion. And that's too bad. It really is. I'm someone who likes to be precise. That's why I like Revit. That's why I want to bring Revit into Twinmotion. And unfortunately, it just so happens that Twinmotion does not allow for something that precise to come in. Now, there could be a way. I know of ways that you could work with an AutoCAD file that has those points and elevations that's calling out what those specific points are in elevation. I would use that survey for my Revit model, but I could also, if I had the points, could end up using the same thing in Twinmotion. So I'd essentially rebuild the terrain in Twinmotion that I would use in Revit, just native to Twinmotion, so hey, it would work in Twinmotion and not just bring in a surface from Revit. Okay, anyway, so we've looked at that, and maybe you want a quicker way of making your own, or just you want some sort of terrain that's not some real world data. You want some terrain, you want something to work with. Well, we can make that ourselves, and let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to hide this, and we're going to go to actually Photoshop. So in Photoshop here, I'm just going to make the size doesn't matter, but just know the size that you made here, and then make sure you're using the same size and scale and all that whenever you bring that into Twinmotion. So again, none of this matters. It really doesn't. So I'll just make it a 1024 by 1024. Resolution doesn't really matter, but let's put it at 150. I'll hit create, and so we've got a square. Cool. It is a square. And we could actually save as a PNG file, bring this into Twinmotion, and have this imported as a height map. And the result would be the amplitude. Whatever I set, I'd have a flat plane at that amplitude, and it would just cascade down the sides of the square. I could do the same thing with black, and it would be at the base level 0, and there would be no elevation. It would basically like be using the scene graph starting plane. Like that's what it would be. So how do we get some variation? Well, we end up mixing black and white. So I can just paint all this in. I can do that, and I can have this brought into our Twinmotion. And we'll do this a number of times, just really quickly to show you the result that we get, because this will have different effects. So coming into Heightmap, we'll just call this 1. We'll save. Make sure it's a PNG, of course. We'll go back to Twinmotion, go to Import, Landscape, Open. We'll go to 1. And again, always the options. I want to smooth it out. It's going to pick up that my largest dimension is 1024, so that's cool. My amplitude is half of that, so I don't want that. I'll just put it at 50 or maybe 100. We'll still see quite a lot. So hit OK, get it loaded in. I don't see it at all. It's actually up there, so let's go select it there, click F, and we can see finally that we are within range. Then I can see the whole thing. Man, like it looks absurd. And of course it does. So basically we made a giant plane, like I said, at that 100 meters tall. And so then we created a giant canyon that is essentially 100 meters deep. And it is what it is. So I can change this up. I can sculpt it and do whatever I want at this point. I'll show you how to do that later. But going back to Photoshop, I can do whatever I want here. Like if I want to do that, I can, again, save this. Maybe I want to save it over itself. I'm just kind of trying to run through all the things that you might think of doing, that might want to do for something like this. Go back to Twinmotion, and now I can just simply reload this, and I can get a giant line striking through it all. It's really easy. It's really cool, and you can get your own. So this is, in my mind, a little too simple. So let's go ahead and just remove all of this. We'll undo all that. And something cool to start with might be a filter. So we can start with filter, render, and clouds. They're great. It's cool. It's very simple, and I can start to play with things from there. I can go to my adjustments, I can change my brightness, but let's go to my curves. And really, I can just get any value that I want. So taking everything that we've really, and hopefully that you've learned throughout this video, we could see that as I change these, move the different values here, place the different points here, I'm getting different results based on my curves. And all of this is going to affect the elevation of all of those points. And so really you could get it to just about anything that you want, whether you want this to be something that's, got some, maybe you want to fill something with water, maybe you got a river, maybe something like that, maybe you've got a little hill. That's great. But really it's all about getting the look that you want, and just knowing that the black's going to be at the bottom and then the white's going to be at your amplitude, and everything else in between is going to fill in those areas. And I would highly recommend that you use something more than just the default clouds, do something more with it. But we can just work with this. I mean, it's a good start. So I can save as, and I'm just going to save this again as my 1. Save it over itself. Yes. Okay. Coming back here, I just want to reload that now. And then we can get a much more dynamic looking landscape. And this might be too high. Like I might want less undulation, less elevation, less amplitude from all of this, but it really does work well and it's not bad. And if I go to the ground, maybe it might be something that we want and that we're okay with. Like these are still pretty substantial looking hills. And so maybe I need a little less than this. I don't know. Who knows? But it's a really quick way to get something like this going. So finally, we can really, again, we can do anything that we want. If we want to smudge this, we can get weird with it. Absolutely anything like that. You can see I can start smudging it. I can do whatever I want. I can change some of these values again, get a different result. You kind of get the idea. So if I save this as, of course, we're going to get the exact same result, but updated. It's kind of what we want. Now, unfortunately, if you do want to change the scale of this, there's not a real way of doing that because you're going to have to essentially re-import it. So maybe what we'll do is go ahead and re-import it at a smaller scale. Import, make sure we go to landscape, open, and then there it is. And I want maybe have my amplitude at 45, 50, something like that, and smoothing. And I'll turn it on, hit OK. And honestly, you understand at this point. You get the idea. You know what you can do. You can really do anything, and that's the nice part. But just know this is not precise. It really is whatever you want, and it kind of is what it is. That's really all I can say, and that's what I'm going to end up ending with, because as much as I want something that's scaled and perfect and precise and everything, we're just not going to get that right now. And my hope is down the line we will have that capability, and I can imagine that we will to some degree, because if we have all of these different tools as far as location goes, so we can add all these buildings and whatnot, as far as context, it's really nice to have that. But if I can grab all of this from OpenStreetMap, all the building data and everything, why can't I grab the topography? All of that would be nice if it actually came with it, correct, and all that. Great, whatever. I'm talking about a perfect world that doesn't exist yet, but someday maybe. So if you did happen to learn something, demolish that like button and please subscribe. That also helps me out. We looked at everything Heightmaps at this point as far as creating your own, finding them online. You can always go to Google, search Heightmap, and then use that. It works all the same. But we ended up making our own. And if you want to, further edit it from here, check out my next video, which will be coming out pretty soon, about how we can take this and make it a little different within Twinmotion. Really nice. So thank you for sticking around this long if you did. I know I've talked a lot about Heightmaps, and so hopefully you learned everything that you need to know about them, using them in Twinmotion. I hope to see you in the next video. Have a wonderful day, and thanks for watching.